What up, folks? This your boy GQ, the Shy Boy, and welcome to another episode of Talk That Mess, the gentleman's perspective on shit that happens. Today is March 18th, 2019. Have you ever woke up in the morning and the first thing that you ever did was to check your social media? If you kind of smirking a little bit, I understand, because I realize that I do that and I'm not the only person in the world, so I know I'm not unique in that regard. However, many people may or may not do what I do on my social media when I first wake up. The first thing that I do, I go to my Facebook page and I look at the on this day notification to see what posts did I make on this day each year prior, or as early as they actually catalog. I want to see where my mental state was at that point in my life. Like, what was I thinking March 18th, 2008? Man, I was ratchet. Man, I was deep. Man, I was having an epiphany. Those are the type of things that really help with self-reflection that many people don't even understand that's available to them. I don't want to make this a teachable moment. I just want to preface what I'm about to say by saying that's what I do. On this particular day, I actually seen that 2 years ago, I shared a meme that depict an older sister holding what could be considered her grandchild with her grandson holding a football right next to her. It doesn't sound like anything would be out of the ordinary. You know, there's always a double side to the meme that basically paints a picture that may not be reality. It's really trying to articulate a visual point to what they're saying in their narrative or whatever. In this particular post, it says you could get a welfare check, you could get food stamps, you could get Section 8. There's only one requirement. You must stay poor. Just sign the contract, the devil's bargain for both of you and your children, and you can have all these things. If you want to stay on welfare, you want to get food stamps, you want to do Section 8, you want to be a beneficiary to these social safety net programs, you have to be willing to stay poor. Now, I'm not going to go that far to say that if you need assistance, you're making a deal with the devil. However, I do have an opinion about it. Let's go. Listen up. I got something to say. Listen up. I got something to say. Peter Piper picked the pepper, and I drop rhymes, and I'ma talk that shit, cause I back mine. So don't sleep, listen up, I got something to say. Rise up, live life, and keep the haters at bay.
Hey.
But I'ma talk that shit.
Hey.
But I'ma talk that shit.
Hey.
But I'ma talk that shit. Thank you again for joining me on this episode of Talk That Mess, the gentleman's perspective to shit that happens. Do you know that the 13th Amendment purpose was to abolish slavery? And I'm sure you do, because I like to believe that I don't have any connections to any unintelligent people. However, for the benefit of the class, I'm going to give the definition of what the 13th Amendment is. Section 1 of the 13th Amendment declares that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, nor any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2 gives Congress the power to enforce the ban of passing laws pertaining to practices that violate this amendment. Thinking critically, I would argue that these laws are grounded in the view that slavery was just not holding back Black Americans to unpaid services, but there's an entire system of social relations that are designed to enforce a racial hierarchy. What this means to me is that the politics surrounding the American welfare system feels like a violation of the 13th Amendment. There's nothing wrong with a temporary setback to strategize a major comeback, but the psychological and economic effects on my community as it relates to the political narrative looks a lot like a tactic out of the art of war. Now, I may be exaggerating, but I would love for somebody to change my mind or educate me on a perspective that will conflict with what I'm thinking right now. I know a lot of us will argue that, white people, they account for a higher percentage of welfare recipients than any other ethnicity in America. That's true because they have a greater population. I'm not going to get into the percentages of that population in contrast to the percentages based on the number of population. Man, that's an economist's job. But at the very core, I just want to say that I understand that white people account for a higher percentage of welfare recipients than any other ethnicity in America. I get that. But one of the things that nobody likes to talk about, these poor white people have a tax deductible expense to their economic disposition that would get them out of the red and back to the black immediately, if not ahead. And that tax deductible expense is called white privilege. You know what? I want to share something interesting with you guys. I was actually reading this essay called White Privilege and Male Privilege, a personal account of coming to see the correspondences through work in women's studies by a woman named Peggy McIntosh. Peggy was stating that men were unwilling to acknowledge, well, at least in her experience, men were unwilling to acknowledge that our societal norms overprivileged men, even though those same men that was unwilling to acknowledge that did acknowledge that women in this societal norm were disadvantaged. She later goes on to explain that these men believe their denial protects their male privilege from being fully acknowledged, lessened, or ended. I actually would agree with her assessment, but I don't really think you're really seeing a shift in that needle between overt versus covert male privilege until Black people start fighting against second-class citizenship. That's when you really started to see it. I do feel like white people have been taught about racism as something that naturally puts people in at a disadvantage. But on the other side of that coin, I don't really think they have been taught to identify the corollary aspects of that same definition. They're taught about racism and how it's a bad thing, but they're not taught about is that white privilege, the white privilege that gives them an advantage. Peggy goes on to say that she thinks that white people are carefully taught not to recognize white privilege, as males are taught not to recognize male privilege, but to recognize white privilege as an invisible fanny pack or knapsack that has unearned assets they can cash in at any time. In her essay, she says that white privilege was an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provision, maps, passports, code books, cheat code books, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks. That was her equation of white privilege. Damn, if I had access to a fanny pack like that or a knapsack like that, you could be Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. The sheer benefit in this context of white privilege would advantage almost anybody on the game. You literally peek behind the curtain of success. And the iceberg, fuck the iceberg. You are the iceberg. And there's no tip. That's what white privilege is. And people, for some reason, don't seem to acknowledge this. What I do appreciate about Peggy's essay is that it wasn't just about the highlights of white privilege in contrast to male privilege, but it was really a reflection of the lessons that she learned as she studied the whole concept of privilege. And to quote her directly, she says that after I realized the extent to which men work from a base of unacknowledged privilege, I understood that much of their oppressiveness was unconscious. But the next part, ladies and gentlemen, is really important because she didn't contrast from a male perspective to a female perspective when it came to white privilege. She broke that shit down woman to woman. So she says, I remember the frequent charges from Black women that white women whom they encountered were oppressive. I began to understand why they were seeing us as oppressive, even though we didn't see it that way ourselves. I began to count the ways in which I enjoy unearned skin privilege and have been conditioned into oblivion about its existence. End quote. If you want to read the whole essay or you're curious, just Google it. Google white privilege and male privilege by Peggy McIntosh. That's not really the scope of my talk today. I just brought that essay up to support my point on white privilege being a tax deductible benefit for the economic disposition of poor white folks and how This particular deduction can single-handedly bring the financial balance sheet from red back to black. Changed my mind. Back to welfare. When you hear the word welfare, W-E-L-F-A-R-E, what do you envision? Now, I'm not a mind reader, but one thing that I do know is that actions speak a hell of a lot louder than words. And historically speaking, in America, it would appear as if the wealthy conservatives, I'm talking about people that are old enough and still living today to have been able to view a live broadcast airing Martin Luther King or Malcolm X delivering an address regarding the circumstances of being Black in America. If you are a white conservative that was old enough to be living now and then, I imagine that you would have a very skewed view of the word welfare when you envision it. And that image will more or less depict a shiftless Black person getting unearned benefits. That shit sounded trifling coming out of my mouth. I don't even like for real. And as appalling as it may sound, we know there are citizens in this country that feel that way, despite white people being the majority of beneficiaries for the social safety net program. In all honesty, this vision will probably align with today's media interpretation, which we would also have to acknowledge. This media medium also shaped the views of welfare and the welfare state of many of us, many Black people. In actuality, welfare, or the cash assistance program, now referred to as temporary assistance for needy families, only amounts to about $16.6 billion per year. That budget for temporary assistance for needy families only equates to about 0.4% of the overall federal budget. That amount has been frozen since Bill Clinton was in office, okay? And some of y'all wasn't even alive back then, which makes me feel a little fucking old, to be quite honest with you. But what's weird is that the current administration and the media will try to get you to believe that the nation is spending way too much on these social safety net programs. When an administration sets out to brand nearly all social safety net programs as welfare, make no mistake about it, they're attempting to mobilize racial resentment and delegitimize these programs as a way of setting the stage for future cuts, particularly in the culturally dense code phrase for Black, Latino, etc. communities. So what's the solution? Damn, Q, you gave me problems, you gave me insight, but do you have any solutions for somebody like me? I'm temporarily displaced. My house was in a fire. I was caught in a natural disaster, such as Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Maria. I lost everything. What can I do? Now I have to depend on these social programs. There's nothing wrong with a temporary setback to ignite a strong comeback. But the biggest thing that I can say, the biggest thing that I want to say, many of us are connected to people that are wealthy that we may even talk to on a daily basis. You need to go engage somebody. Connect to them in a direct message, man. Be a little vulnerable. You got to network with people. You would be surprised how many successful people can't wait for people to engage them about some of the things that they're doing or for their help. Some people that work really hard to get to where they are, the thing that they regard most is how many people they've helped once they got in a position to do so. Once they cup runneth over, they start counting cups they fill up, not dollar signs. So networking would definitely be one. Number two, my caution to you would be, there's nothing wrong with a temporary setback to strategize for a major comeback, but never, ever find complacency in a free lunch. And lastly, sometimes you got to be willing to work for free to get free. I moved from Indiana. When I came back to Chicago, I was hungry for a change, a real change, a meaningful change. I wanted to evolve and become that black butterfly. Shout out to Denise Williams. But anyway, I went to a liquor store, not just to buy a drink, but they had these books called the Black Pages. In these Black Pages were all Black owned businesses. It was just like a Yellow Pages, but for all Black businesses. I thought that was phenomenal. And since I had just started school for business, I said, damn, I don't have any white collar experience. Outside of the military, the only experience I had was working in the factory. I was a phlebotomist too, but I didn't really want to get back into that work. So I was in school for business. I wanted to start getting white collar experience so I can start getting in some type of corporate business finance structure, so to speak. I started cold calling people right in my mother's living room. Hey, look, my name is Quinn Brewington. I don't have any experience, but I'm a military veteran and I'm in school for business. And I would love an opportunity to work for free to show you my value before you give me an opportunity to earn money from you. I did that to like maybe 4 or 5 people before 2 business owners on the south side of Chicago that probably resonated with my story that wanted to give me a shot. And I'm happy to say, man, one of them dudes, he put me on the path. This guy owned a mortgage company and a finance company. He told me to show up professionally dressed. As soon as I showed up, we broke the ice. We talked. He introduced me to his wife, who was also his business partner. That was a gem for me right there, too. But then he goes on to say, look, man, I can appreciate, you like Stacey Adams, but them shoes, they're not professional. Them slacks, those are not professional. You don't go to a job looking like you're about to go to a stepping competition. Then he started laughing at me or whatever. He took me to a store, showed me some things, and just kind of mentored me a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to look past a paycheck and just look at an opportunity in the basic sense, because it's going to position you. Because of that game I got from that relationship with this dude, I can't even tell you how much money I made. But let me just say, I ain't starving. My kids ain't starving. And I'm proud to say that, man, I'm on track. I'm speaking into existence. I'm on track to being a first generation millionaire. Now, that don't mean I got money. I'm just saying that I know my goal is to become a first generation millionaire. So I'm going to speak it as if I'm already there. I learned that from Arnold Schwarzenegger. Before he even got into Hollywood, he was just doing bodybuilding. And the guy asked him, he's like, yo, what are you going to do now after you won Mr. Olympia? He said, I'm going to take over Hollywood. He said, how you going to do that? He said, I'm about to start walking as if I'm already the #1 superstar in Hollywood. And guess what? In a short period of time, he was the #1 superstar in Hollywood. And with that being said, look, man, God bless y'all. There's nothing wrong with a temporary setback for a major comeback. Don't ever feel ashamed about needing assistance publicly, or just asking a friend. People care about you and they want to see you do well. And this could just be me looking at the higher level of consciousness of all beings, because I think we're all capable of love, support, and assisting others to be better if they want to be. So until that, holler at you on the next episode. I'm out. Peace. Listen up. I got something to say. Listen up. I got something to say. Peter Piper picked a pepper, and I drop rhymes, and I'ma talk that shit, cause I back mine. So don't sleep, listen up, I got something to say. Rise up, live life, and keep the haters at bay.
Hey.
But I'ma talk that shit.
Hey.
But I'ma talk that shit.
Hey.